I work at a church, and so I had a volunteer that was gonna, like, handle some of my work while I was on maternity leave, and I was talking to her. It was a Sunday night. I was talking to her. I was on the treadmill walking for my gestational diabetes, and we're on the phone, and I've got tons of energy, and I'm like, "Don't worry, Christine." I'm like, "I'm gonna be there on Sunday," like, a week from that day. I was like, "I'm gonna be there. You won't even have to like, you won't have to take over anything." And then she was like, "Okay, maybe." And then I went into labor that night.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. Birth stories, birth education, and the pursuit of surrendering it all to God. Let's get started. Hey everyone, another late night here at the Heater household. My big kids are leaving to go spend the week with their grandparents in Georgia tomorrow. So just finishing up some last minute laundry and packing. And I had the pleasure of teaching a birth class tonight, the one that we're filming for our upcoming online course, actually. So that was really fun. That was our 4th week of that. We've got one more week to go. And got, kids down, finished pumping, and here we are. Time to record the intro for this week. So I hope your weeks are off to a great start. I wanted to go ahead and read our review of the week. We've been doing that here for a few weeks now. Nick Sip says, "Addicted in the best way. Finished the first 3 episodes in 2 days. Can't wait for more. Surrendered Birth Stories is so positive without sugarcoating the tough emotions and real challenges that come with birth and early motherhood. Highly recommend." Thank you. I think that was an earlier review from when we launched last year, which I'm so grateful for. But it's never too late to write a review. We're coming up on our 1-year anniversary, and we would love to get some more reviews for the show. So if you could please leave a review, just scroll down. It's really easy on Apple Podcasts. You just scroll right down, and there's a thing for you to click right there. It just says leave a review. So just click on that, and you can very quickly and simply type up a review, and we would love it if you could do that. It would get this show in front of more people, and then maybe I will read your review. Speaking of our 1-year anniversary, that is coming up in 2 weeks, which is crazy. It's just only 2 weeks away. It would have been a whole year since we launched this podcast. And as a part of that, we are doing a giveaway actually over on our Instagram page, which is called Surrendered Birth Services, not just birth stories, because we do offer, childbirth classes and birth doula services as well. So it's the link is in our show notes for the Instagram page, and be on the lookout because I will be launching that giveaway later this week. So keep your eyes peeled. It's coming together. We have the last few details we are organizing for that giveaway. I'm super excited about it, though. I hope you guys will all enter and share it, and hopefully one of you will win. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hindsight is always 2020. And we are blessed that God allows us to learn things through our experiences to help make changes for the better next time. Even though there are some things that Natasha would choose to do differently in her next birth experience, God was right there with her through her entire journey and gave her the peace that comes with His presence. During pregnancy, labor, and postpartum, with the help of counseling and the Lord, she was able to combat her anxiety and fear with truth and trust. Listen today as Natasha shares her sweet story of her son's birth. Welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. I am your host, Kayla Heater, and today I have Natasha with me. So Natasha, can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and your family and your life so we can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my name's Natasha, and I'm married to AJ. We've been married for 9.5 years, and we have one son. His name's Henry, and he just turned 1 in May. And And yeah, I'm just excited to be on here, honored to be on here. Can't wait to share my story.
Well, great. Well, let's get into it then. So, tell us a little bit about getting pregnant then. Was that something that you guys had planned? Was it something that just happened? Tell us the story behind your pregnancy.
Yeah. Yeah. So um, I was sick for most of my 20s and didn't know if I was going to get better and be able to try to have kids. So the Lord definitely was very faithful, and he healed my body in a lot of ways and my mind too. And so we moved to North Carolina from Illinois because we wanted to try to have kids. My husband's family had moved down here about 8 years previous, and we knew that we'd probably need their support. And so we moved down here and just kind of started our life over. It was pretty crazy, just moving across the country. But yeah, moved down here, and then we had been here about a year and then decided to start trying. And yeah, I had one pregnancy that was like 3 months before I got pregnant with Henry, and lost that baby really early. I think it was technically called a chemical pregnancy, but I still consider it a loss.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that was really hard. I had kind of anticipated at least having one miscarriage. My mom and I are genetically similar in a lot of ways, and she had several miscarriages. She had like 6 or 8 miscarriages.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was something I was very familiar with, and so I had anticipated it, but also it was still just like really hard and devastating. And but I felt like, I don't know, just like I needed to try to get pregnant again right away. So we waited like I think like a month or 2 months and then tried again, and I got pregnant with Henry. So the two times that I've tried to get pregnant, I've gotten pregnant, which has been a gift.
Mm.
And yeah, when I found out I was pregnant with him, I was very excited and also just very nervous. That will be like a theme throughout most of my pregnancy story, as I had a lot of anxiety and was just like really afraid of losing him, honestly. Just was really scared and excited and hopeful, but also just really scared. So,
So, was there anything else during your pregnancy that made you nervous or anxious, or was it just the fact that you were thinking about the possibility of losing another baby?
yeah, I had some kind of like weird pregnancy symptoms. I had a cyst. I'm trying to think what it was called. A polyp. I had a polyp on my cervix, that would occasionally cause some like light bleeding, and so that would always just kind of freak me out a little. And then I had a lot of pain. I had like my uterus was very sensitive, so like I had Braxton Hicks starting at like 20 weeks, and they were like really intense. So I just had like some kind of weird pregnancy things that were like, I don't know, I think they maybe kind of perpetuated it. But in my mind, a lot of it was just like a state of mind. There was just like a lot of fear that was like consuming me. So,
Hmm. Did you try and do anything to combat that fear throughout the pregnancy?
yeah, I had been in therapy kind of on and off through my 20s. And so I got back into therapy. I saw a counselor, and it was great. I mean, I love counseling. I feel like I'll probably be in counseling on and off most of my life. But it was great to be able to process and for her to kind of like push back on some of those fears and just remind me that feeling isn't always reality. And yeah,
Well, that's great.
yeah.
So, beyond your thoughts and your emotions and some of those weird symptoms you were having, were there any other highlights for your pregnancy? Did it go pretty smoothly? How did it go?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was thankful. I was pretty nauseous for about 20 weeks. I can't remember exactly when it ended, but I didn't throw up at all, which is like a huge, I hate throwing up. So I was so thankful. But I don't, and now it's like kind of funny. I was like super gaggy. Like anytime I opened the fridge, I would gag. I don't know. It was kind of funny now, but at times it was sucky. And let's see, the anatomy scan was a huge highlight for me. We found out the gender at that scan. So we found out that he was a boy, and I don't know, it just like became real to me, and like getting to see all his fingers and his toes and his even his spine. Like I remember that just being so just amazing that like my body was building this baby. Like it was just, that was so cool. I was like so proud of him already. Like I was just like, my son, so excited. Can't wait to meet you. And up until that point, I feel like I was kind of like disconnected and like it just didn't feel real. And then when I kind of got to see what he looked like and found out he was a boy, and yeah, it was just so fun. So
Mm. That anatomy scan is always really fun. Finding out
yes.
the gender. If you hadn't, I know some people start to find out the gender now, like immediately, like right
Yeah.
away. It's
Yeah.
like they
Yeah.
find out they're pregnant and within a couple weeks they know what the gender is.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody kind of has a different way that's good for them. This was perfect for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just it was a gift for me. It was like an answer to prayer in a lot of ways. And yeah, it was just really cool.
So, what did you do for care during your pregnancy? Who did you go to? Like, what kind of care provider did you seek?
Yeah, so I wanted to find a midwife. I've always been a little crunchy, and so I was like, I'd like to find someone that can support me in that and won't be like butting heads with me the whole time if there are certain things that I don't want to do during pregnancy and especially during labor. So I had several friends that had delivered through an office here and really like were raving about the midwives. And so I contacted them. Actually, I had started with a different provider. Actually, I'm remembering that now too. I had started with a different provider and I don't know, I didn't feel like I connected with her. She had kind of some responses in those first couple meetings with her that like I didn't feel like she maybe would be as sensitive to me as as I needed during that season. And so yeah, so I switched and it was like a group with three midwives. And so it was like I rotated through them. But there was one that I connected with a lot and she was ended up being the one that delivered Henry. So
Oh,
yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So then going in to labor,
Hmm.
then the end of your pregnancy is drawing near. How far along were you when you went into labor and what was that like? Did you go into labor naturally? Were you induced? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I had every intention of going into labor really late. I assumed I'd probably be like past 40 weeks, 41 weeks. I was like, I also found these midwives because I knew that they would let me go to 42 weeks. They like would force me to get induced at 30, at 41, if everything was okay. And so I was like, okay, I'm probably going to go late. Everybody goes late, their first pregnancy. And then now looking back on like some of the interactions I had with my midwife, like at like my last appointment, I think she maybe knew that I was going to go into labor. But ended up going into labor 5 days early.
Oh.
Um, yeah, and so it was really funny too. I work at a church, and so I had a volunteer that was going to like handle some of my work while I was on maternity leave. And I was talking to her. It was a Sunday night. I was talking to her. I was on the treadmill. And yeah, because I forgot to mention I had gestational diabetes too, which added like a whole other element. But so I'm like on my treadmill walking for my gestational diabetes and we're on the phone and I've got tons of energy. And I'm like, don't worry, Christine. I'm like, I'm gonna be there on Sunday, like a week from that day. I was like, I'm gonna be there. You won't even have to like you won't have to take over anything. And then she was like, okay, maybe. And then I went into labor that night. So yeah. Yeah. And my water broke at 2 a.m. I got up to pee and kind of like leaned over to grab some toilet paper. And then it was crazy. Water was just like gushing out of me. And I was like, I don't think that's pee. So
Yeah, when it gushes like that. So you probably hadn't had any symptoms before that then.
no, my stomach was like kind of upset on that Sunday. So I guess I went into labor early Monday morning. So that Sunday my stomach was kind of upset. I was really hungry. I had a lot of energy, like some of those kind of signs that people talk about, but I didn't know. Like there was no contractions or anything. My contractions started about 2 hours after my water broke.
Okay, well that's good.
Yeah.
Because sometimes after, if your water breaks first, it can take a really long time for contractions to start. So that's great. They started pretty soon after.
Yeah. I was really thankful.
Were they like pretty close together when they started, or were they like spaced out early labor type stuff?
Yeah. It was very typical early labor. It was like 30 minutes or more apart. Like I remember the first one starting. So if I went, my water broke at 2. And then I think it was around 4, I remember starting to feeling like kind of some cramping, like a more intense breast and hip kind of feel. They didn't start getting really close until much later in that day. So I tried to go back to bed after my water broke and was trying not to wake my husband up because I'm like, my husband's going to need to sleep. So I got like a puppy pad out because we have puppy pads. So I got a puppy pad out and I put my like postpartum diaper on. And I was like, I'm just going to go back to sleep on the couch, I guess. And then I accidentally woke my husband up and he's like, is everything all right? And I was like, well, yes. And also, my water just broke. So then we were like wide awake and it was 2 a.m. So
So did you end up staying up the rest of the night?
pretty much, yeah. I think maybe slept like another hour. I ended up like getting out of bed at like 8 or 9 a.m. And I think I maybe got like an hour of sleep that whole time because I was just nervous and excited. And I just wish I would have slept. And hopefully next time I'll be able to.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
I say that about my first labor story too. I wish
Yeah.
I would have gone back to bed.
Yep. Yep. It's hard to do.
So you are starting to have contractions, you're in early labor, your water's already broken, you're at home.
Mhm.
Did you have any kind of vision or plan for your birth? Like, was there any certain type of birth that you wanted? I assume you were birthing at the hospital.
Yeah.
So what did you want it to look like?
Mhm. Yeah. So, my hope was that my labor would be and delivery would be as natural as possible. My goal was to not have any help with medical intervention, and I was going to labor at the or deliver at the hospital. We live like we're like 25 minutes from the closest hospital, and my mom did home births. And so I was like open to the idea, but with it being my first and being far, I was like, I think I'm just gonna labor and deliver at the hospital. So my plan was to labor at home as long as possible, which I did. I did do that. Um,
So then how did the rest of that day go?
yeah, so I got out of bed around 8 or 9, and because I had gone into labor way earlier than I thought I was, I still had a little bit of work left to do, which I don't know if I probably wouldn't do this the same way I did, but I had like 3 hours and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get like wrap up my maternity leave plan, sign in my automated email replies, and wrap up a bunch of things. And so yeah, I just like booked it for 3 hours. I just sat on my laptop and just worked. So my contractions obviously weren't that bad if I was working. And maybe it was good because it gave me something for my mind to do. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I worked until noon and then I logged off. And then my midwife wanted me to come in and have the non-stress test done because my water had broke. She just wanted to make sure baby was okay. So that was around 2 that I came in for that, and it was great. The whole like labor process, I felt like the Lord's presence. Like I feel like he helped me be aware of his presence. The whole the whole process. And I just remember like sitting there and having the non-stress test, and I'm like drinking cold water so he'll move. And I just remember feeling a lot of peace. My midwife came in and was like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, I'm good, because contractions weren't that bad at that point. Yeah, so he looked great. Everything seemed good. And so she gave me the option to either get checked into the hospital. I did not want to be checked. I purposely didn't have my cervix checked because I'd been listening to all these other birth podcasts before, and they were talking about the mental game of labor. And so I purposely didn't want to be checked because I didn't want to have the idea of it's going to take this many hours and have that interfere with my stamina. And so I didn't want to be checked. And she was like, that's totally fine. She's like, do you want to get checked in? And I was like, no, I just want to go home. So we went home and I labored. Oh, wait, I got food first. My other goal was to eat as much as possible during labor because I didn't know once I got to the hospital how much they let me eat.
Right.
So, so it's like a Greek restaurant here called Mythos.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Wait, where do you live?
I live in Greensboro,
Ah,
like
I
right
live
outside
in
of Greensboro.
Greensboro.
Really? I wondered where you
Yeah.
were at. I knew you were in North Carolina, but I didn't know where you were at in North Carolina.
Well,
So,
you too. I knew you were in North Carolina, but I didn't know where.
yeah,
Well, look at
yeah,
that. We're both in Greensboro.
yeah.
Oh, we know
Uh,
all about Meet Grill
oh,
and
so good.
those chicken kebabs and
Oh,
their
yeah.
salad with that
Oh,
dressing,
oh, yeah.
the pita and the hummus
Mm,
and mm-hmm.
so good. Yeah. yeah, so that was like, I was like, that's a pretty safe meal. I was like, if I do end up getting sick in labor, it shouldn't be super traumatic if I do get sick with that meal. And so yeah, so we went to Mythos and contractions were like starting to get more intense. I think it was like 4 p.m. And so I was like in line and I was at the counter and the lady was like, "Are you doing okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I'm good." And she's like, "When are you due?" And I was like, I'm actually in labor right now." And she was like, "Oh my goodness." And there was like a teenager behind the counter and he's like, "You're in labor right now?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "That's the coolest thing I've ever heard."
Oh.
It was so cute. Um, it was super sweet. So that was one of the highlights of my labor process was getting Mythos. Because I wanted AJ was like, I could just go get it. I was like, no, I'd rather stand anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, and it was that funny story, which was fun. So yeah, so I ate my Mythos. It was delicious and drove home and then labored for another, I think it was like 4 hours at home. And things were starting to get pretty intense. My husband was like, we need to go to the hospital. And I was like, just the next after the next contraction, just like I just let me get through this one and then we'll go during the next break. Cause I think I had like eight I think it was like 8 minutes maybe in between contractions at this point. So I was like, I'll get in, I'll get in the car during the next break. And he just kept saying, come on, we got to get in the car. We got to get in the car. And then I think it took me a good 30 minutes to an hour before he could convince me to get in the car. Cause I knew once I got in the car, I wouldn't be able to move. I was like moving a ton during all my contractions. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be stuck in the car. And I was also like afraid, like once I get to the hospital, I'm like, this is real. Like I'm actually having this baby. So
8 minutes is still like a pretty decent break in between them. Did they get any
yeah,
closer together than that before you left?
I know for a while they were like sporadic. Like I was having like 4 minutes and then like an 8 minute break. And I'm trying to remember if that was before we got to the hospital or if that was like during that time. Yeah, I don't know. I'm remembering 8 minutes, so I'm going to go with that.
Sounds good. We'll just go with 8 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
So then when you got to the hospital, now, did they require a cervical exam when you got there, or did they let it fly because your water was already broken?
Yeah, they let it fly. I had given them my midwife a birth plan before, and I had requested no checks unless I asked for them. And she was great. She was super willing to accommodate my birth plan and let me be as kind of crunchy and as natural as I wanted. They also had the hospital like trying to think like my check-in process was really quick. Like they had something already figured out on the back end that we like got there and like my check-in process was super quick. And so I was able to get up to the room really quickly and my midwife was already there. And she was like, I thought you were coming like, a while ago. And AJ was like, I couldn't get her in the car. But things were intense at that point. Again, I can't really remember how far I was. Like maybe it was like 6 minutes in between contractions. But things were starting to get more intense. And yeah, but they were good with the cervical checks. They weren't forcing me to get those, which was great. So
Good.
yeah.
So what was it like when you got up to the room then? What time, I guess, did you get checked in and get up to the room?
Yeah, I think it was about 9 p.m. at that point, and they wanted me to have the IV port, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do it. And my husband and my wife were like, just do it, just in case, like just in case you need it. So they put it on my hand, but it was like the taped one, like I wasn't hooked up to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would do that the same way again next time. I was thankful that I had it, and then. They got the tub ready for me. They gave me like a robe, but it was like super scratchy. So they let me bring my own clothes. So I was like in like a little black like onesie thingy that was super comfy. And yeah, I got in the tub and things were like pretty intense at that point. I'm trying to remember. I guess I keep saying they were pretty intense. But from the time I got in the car,
I was
moving
like,
forward, it
you
felt
left
intense.
home because they were pretty intense.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was in the tub it was at least an hour. And I went from wherever I was like into transition in the tub. And so had like all the shakes and everything, and things were like a minute and a half apart.
And
I
what time
think,
was
but
that? Do you remember?
it was around, I think it was 10 or 11.
Okay, so not too long after you got there.
Mm-mm, no. Yeah, the tub was great. I still like was moving a lot during my contractions. And I think I was like starting to kind of wear myself out. My midwife, I think, was sensitive to like physically, I was just getting really tired. And so she had me get out of the pool. She wanted me to sit on the toilet for a little while to try to help move him down. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just remember like standing up out of the tub and being like, I felt like the coldest I had ever been in my entire life. I was just like shaking. I was shivering so bad. I was just like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. And my midwife was so sweet. I don't know if I was doing something with my arms, but she like gave me a hug. It was so sweet. Yeah, so they wrapped me in a towel, got me over to the toilet, and then my temperature was like all over the place. It was like I was hot, I was cold, I was hot, I was cold. And I hated being on the toilet. The toilet was not my favorite thing. I know that it was necessary, but I did not like it. The contractions were really interesting to me. I know that everyone experiences them differently. To me, they felt like really, really bad period cramps
Mm-hmm.
and just like a lot of like pelvic floor pressure. And that was like made worse by sitting on the toilet, which I know was like, it was probably productive, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I'll just be interested to see if the Lord brings another child, like how I'll handle those things differently. Like if I'll view the pain as more productive. I feel like I was still trying to escape the pain a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just wonder if I'll be able to kind of view it differently next time. So
I mean, those toilet contractions, I know. They're efficient is what I call them. They're
yes,
efficient contractions.
yes,
They're
that's a
doing a
good way
lot
to
of
word it.
work in a short amount of time.
Yep.
So, once you got off of there and, the hot cold, that is all telltale signs of transition. Your hormones and everything going crazy, causing temperature swings and stuff too. So, okay. So then what happened next?
So they had me doing a couple different positions. They had me on the toilet, then they had me on the bed. They had like the peanut ball kind of like under my legs. And it was like things would feel okay for a couple of minutes. It was probably longer than that. I remember most of them being several contractions. And then I'd be like, okay, gotta move. So they'd move me somewhere else. And they knew I was probably close. I knew I was probably close, and my husband was so sweet. He had like watched all the birth training videos and everything with me, and he was like, he's like, she's in transition. Like, good job, honey. Oh yeah, and I want to highlight him too. He was incredible my entire labor. He was just like there to support me. He was like feeding me drinks. I had this drink that I had found that like trying to think what it was sweetened with. It was like stevia or something. And so I was able to drink it with the gestational diabetes. And anytime I'd take a sip of it during my labor, it was just like the best thing I'd ever tasted. It was like sweet and cold. And it was just, it was a gift. Um, so yeah, so my husband was just like wonderful, and he knew I was in transition. And my midwife was like, hey, would it be okay if I checked you? Like, I think you're pretty close. And I was like, yep, that's fine. Check me. Just don't tell me. Like, I don't want to know. And so she checked me. And then I didn't know this in the minute, but she and my husband and my doula told me later that she like leaned over to them and was like, she's 9.5 centimeters. So
Wait,
I
you
was
had a doula there too?
I did. I forgot to mention her. So yeah, she showed up. So oh yeah, and there's other things I forgot.
Well,
Oh well.
just tell me now. Tell us
Okay.
now.
Okay. So yeah, so I had a doula lined up and a lactation consultant. They were like a team. And so she was in my small group at my church. And we had small group that Monday night. And so obviously we weren't there because we were in labor, but she was there, and she had been texting my husband and my midwife and was like, hey, do I need to come? Do I need to come? They're like, nah, you got time. You got time. And then something happened somewhere in there where like phone service stopped working or something. And so she didn't end up showing up until transition. Um,
Oh.
and so yeah, so I forgot to mention that because I don't even really, I kind of remember when she got there. I was on the toilet, so it wasn't a good moment. Wasn't a good moment. Um, yeah, and that car ride that I had from home to the hospital, everyone that was in that community group had prayed for me and had recorded their prayers and sent it to me. And it was just, yeah, it was a huge gift. And like, just like the Lord being so kind to me, because I was like feeling very scared and was feeling like, okay, this is real now. And I got to push this baby out of my body. And it's really intimidating. And it was just people, my friends praying for me. And so I just like cried in the car, knowing that my friends were praying for me and that the Lord loved me and cared about me. Um, so it was just, yeah, it was really beautiful. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
So now you are at the end of labor, and your doula and your midwife and your husband are all there, and they all know that you're almost there.
Yeah. So this is where things like went not how I had hoped, but they were still good. My the way that my midwife and my doula explained it to me later was that like I was tired and I was pushing because I could tell that he wasn't like down far enough. Like I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like, but I knew that it wasn't what it was like what it needed to be yet. So like I could tell he was too high in my pelvis. And so I was trying to like push him down. And my midwife was a little concerned about that because I guess if you push too early, like it can hurt your cervix.
Mm.
So she was trying to help my cervix open. And in hindsight, I would just ask her not to do that because it like made the contractions way worse. And
Did
I know
she try and push the lip behind his head?
yes, yes.
Yep. Been
Yeah,
there. It does not make it feel better. That's for
no,
sure.
no, it was pretty horrible. So yeah, I know she was trying to help, and that was like her method of trying to help me at the time. But I probably would ask for her not to do that again. Um, and yeah, so she was trying to help me, and then she said that I was like pulling him back into my body, like because of how tired I was too. There was something with that. So they they had checked me. She was doing that. And I think I said to her, I can tell he's not down far enough. And then she said, let's try to get you like I was like, I think I need more gravity, like helping me. And so they had like pulled the like things on the side of the
Squat
bed.
bar.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was on the bed and I looked up at it and I was like, I don't think I can do that. Like just physically, I was just so tired.
Mm.
And she's like, okay. She's like, let's get on the toilet. And I was like, I don't think I can do that either.
No.
And so she said, hey, you're getting kind of tired and your contractions aren't as strong as I'd like them to be able to push him out. And I was like, okay. And then she was like, I'd like to start some Pitocin to get the contractions stronger. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that without an epidural. So, uh, again, in hindsight, I think I would have tried to wait. It's interesting when I talk to my doula now, because her and I are friends. She's like, you probably still would have had another 3 hours of labor based on like what they were telling with the signs on my body. I don't know. I think in hindsight, I would have said, let's wait like 15 minutes, or maybe maybe in my mind, I would have said 5 minutes and then I would have asked for another five. I don't know. But I was like desperate at that point. The contractions were very painful. I was tired of moving. I was tired, but the Lord was still kind. I still felt like so much peace in this whole process. I felt peace having the epidural. I felt peace getting Pitocin. Um, my husband was in support of it because he could tell I was in a lot of pain and was like, yep, like let's just do it. So it was crazy. As soon as I said that, things moved so fast. They like were bringing all these people in. I was like, the contractions between the epidural and when I said I wanted the epidural were like the worst ones I had had because I knew
Mm-hmm.
relief was coming. And so yeah, they were like, okay, you gotta, sit as still as possible, and there there was this nurse in front of me. They had me like sit on the bed and they had my doula and my husband leave. And there was this nurse that was sitting in front of me. And I never looked her in the face. I don't know what she looked like. I just remember feeling her hands like maybe on my knees. And I just breathed in her face just over and over again. Just these huge, heavy breaths. And was like, I just am at my wit's end here and I'm just in a lot of pain and I can't look at you in the eyes. So they like walked me through everything with epidural. Everything was super quick. They're like, you're gonna feel a little pain here. And I was like, I'm not worried about it at all. So they did the spray and then the needle and everything. And then relief, like I remember that neck contraction being really bad. I remember kind of like whimpering and being like, is this going to be over soon? My midwife was like, super soon, like it's going to set in really quick. And by that next contraction, things had already slowed down. And then by that third one, it had kicked in. So yeah, the sense of relief was huge. I almost wish that the relief hadn't been as much because I couldn't feel the bottom half of my body at all. I had had friends that had had like walking epidurals, and I had that in my birth plan, but I don't know if it got missed or maybe I didn't advocate for it or it's just how my body responded, but I could not feel the bottom half of my body at all. And I didn't like that. That was really unnerving to me. I guess that's like the best way to describe it, like feeling like I can feel the top half, but not the bottom half. Yeah, but my husband came back in. He was very relieved to see that I was not in excruciating pain. And they said, we're gonna have you labor down for like maybe an hour, and then we'll come back and see, if he's moved down farther, if you've progressed, and then, we'll start pushing and he'll be out. So, um, in this process, another thing that I would have done differently, I asked to not have a catheter put in when I had the epidural, because I have had troubles with UTIs. And so I was like, I'm going to try to avoid that if I can. And my midwife was like, it'll be a couple hours. You'll be totally fine. Um, and in hindsight, if I got an epidural, I would just get a catheter because of what my pushing experience was like. And yeah.
Mm. So then were you able to rest then once you had the epidural? Did you take a nap?
Somewhat. I had a really hard time sleeping. I felt very like jittery and kind of shaky and like kind of hard to breathe, which I'm assuming was either the epidural or the Pitocin. I'm not sure which, but I honestly didn't sleep that well. That would have been great if I could have done that. My husband and my doula and my midwife, they all slept. So
Oh,
I was very thankful that they got to sleep, but I was kind of bummed that I didn't get to. And then they kept coming in to check, and like he just wasn't moving down as fast as they had anticipated. So I was awake. My one of my nurses came to check on me, and I was like, "Hey, I'm like totally awake." And my husband and my midwife or my doula had woken back up at that point, and the nurse was like, "Hey, do you want to start pushing? See if we can get him down farther before the midwife comes." And I was like, "Yeah, sure."
were you complete?
Yeah, I was. I was 10 centimeters at that point. Again, in hindsight, yeah, I wouldn't probably have started pushing because I think I pushed for like an hour before the midwife got here and just it was not like productive pushing. They were having problems getting the like monitor that monitors your contractions. They were having a hard time keeping it in place. And so I think that the pushing just wasn't as productive. So midwife came in and she was incredible. Like the energy in the room just totally changed. Like when I was pushing with the nurse, I could tell like people were getting discouraged that I wasn't like able to get him down. And then I was getting discouraged and it was like 3 a.m. And I was just exhausted and discouraged. And my midwife came in. It was like the air in the room just totally changed. She was like energy, like, hey, let's go. And I felt more empowered. And I forgot to mention this at the beginning too, but I'm into homeopathy. And so I was using remedies throughout my labor. And I don't really remember up until this point, like asking for them. I know that my husband had given me a couple. I had like written out I had like this whole handbook of like, give me this remedy if I do like this. And if we're having this trouble, give me this remedy because I knew I wasn't going to be able to handle it. And so I remember asking for a remedy for contractions or like pushing not being productive and positioning not being right or something like that. So he found me a couple of remedies and I had pushed for it was at least another half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. And he still wasn't down far enough. I was feeling very discouraged. I was like, I really don't want to have a C-section after laboring all this way. And um, yeah, I just had really had hoping not to have to do that. And so I just asked my husband, I was like, please pray that I can get him out. I asked my doula for that too. And I felt very alone in that moment because it was 4 a.m. and I had my like community group that was praying for me, and I had another text group that we were updating and that was praying for me. And those were ladies kind of all over the country, people that I've connected with at different churches. And I just knew I couldn't text any of them. And so I was like really discouraged. I was like, who's going to pray for me? But I was praying and yeah, I was just like, Lord, please help me be able to push him out. And they're having me push in all these different positions, like my legs in different ways using the peanut ball and like bed sheets and a couple different things. So eventually I had this thought, because I remember hearing that if your bladder's full, it can prevent your baby from being able to come out. And that was why they wanted me to have the catheter in the first place. So I was like, hey, do you think that I can't get him out because my bladder's full? And my midwife's like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's probably it. And so they drained my bladder. They said it was a lot of pee. And which I heard later, I guess like too, you're supposed to get a catheter because I guess your bladder can burst. And anyways, could have been a nightmare, but it wasn't. They drained my bladder and then I pushed him out in like less than 10 minutes. And so,
So he moved right down after that.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. So my midwife said something like, she like kind of like made a comment to her nurse team. She was like, well, I'm glad the patient was thinking. That was the Lord.
Whoops.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, it's just so interesting, like even to like verbalize it again and just see where like, I don't know, we're just like flawed people. Your medical team's like not perfect. They're like humans that are doing the best they can. And felt like God was just so good. And yeah. So then he came out and he didn't cry a lot. And I was kind of nervous. I was because I didn't hear him cry. And I was like, is he okay? And they were like rubbing him and patting him. And he kind of like gave like a little cry. And they're like, oh, yeah, he's great. He's just super chill. And that is my son. He is just very chill. He is still like that. He's incredibly chill and flexible and just like a happy baby generally. So much so that like when he has like a day where he's kind of like whiny or he cries more, it's like very out of character for him. So,
Well, what a blessing.
yes. Oh, yeah. He's a huge gift. He's a gift, especially like the contrast of like my pregnancy with me just being like so anxious and so fearful and just like, yeah, just like doubting the Lord a lot through that whole pregnancy. And then just having him be so faithful through that labor and then having him. And he's just, yeah, he's just such a gift. I can't imagine life without him. And yeah, so many of the fears that I had, I was really afraid during my pregnancy too, that I was going to be like have like a really, really hard postpartum, that I would have like a lot of anxiety and depression because of my mental health history, and was afraid that I wouldn't want to take care of him or like was going to be neglectful. And I know that's like related to postpartum depression. And I just was so afraid of that. And yeah, he was just like, I just loved him. Like, I was just like, I just want to nurse you and snuggle you. And I was so thankful.
So then nursing and postpartum went well.
Yeah, they went well. They were hard too in their own ways, but I was just so thankful that he was here and he was healthy, and I loved getting to nurse him and snuggle him and like the little baby sounds. Oh my goodness, I had no idea. They would melt my heart.
Mm.
No idea. Because when you hear someone else's baby, you're like, I mean, it's cute, but it's like kind of weird, you know, when it's your baby, it's just, oh my goodness, so special. So yeah, so that part of it was wonderful. He's not a great sleeper. He has not been a great sleeper up until the last couple weeks. So we didn't sleep really great for like a good year. But that was like, especially, I mean, it's kind of normal for the postpartum phase, like those first handful of weeks. But sleep was pretty rough. And then I weirdly had an oversupply of milk. I know that that's not as common. I Googled it. I guess it's like 8% of people or something like that. And so I got mastitis several times because he couldn't like drain to like empty. And then you have the inflammation cycle. And
Yeah.
but I'm super thankful. I worked with my lactation consultant and kind of got me through some of those rough breastfeeding times. I had a lot of nipple pain, kind of weird, like shooting side pains. I don't even know. It was the weirdest thing. But yeah.
Did the mastitis go away after like you got everything regulated and figured out?
Yeah.
Like you don't still struggle with mastitis?
No, I'll still have like engorgement, which is, I mean, crazy. Like I don't even like no one I've talked to has had engorgement a year later. So yeah, so I still have that. My breasts do not like being pumped at all. So that's kind of been an interesting thing to manage being back at work. I just made it work.
Mm.
So it thankfully, yeah, I pumped and he had enough. But yeah, there's just been some hiccups that have been kind of funky. So I just stay on top of like I just kind of know like how to nurse him or how to pump in a way that
That fixes it.
yeah.
Well, good. That's good that you're able to do that.
Yeah.
I know some other people, a few, not many, with an oversupply, but I think they do respond pretty well to a pump, so they end up just giving away all their
Yes.
extra milk.
Yes. I would have loved that. I think that I maybe will next time try to use the Haka,
To catch.
yeah, to
Yeah.
catch extra because I ended up having to stop pumping. Like normally people will like pump early to like start because the supply is heavier at the beginning. And so they'll pump to like start stacking up milk. And I had to stop pumping because I needed to tell my body to not produce any more milk. So it was like
Right.
any more stimulation was like a no. So I think I'll try to use the Haka next time to collect. And yeah, I'm kind of hoping that my son will still be nursing. That's like my secret hope is that he'll still be nursing when I have my next kid so that if I have that issue, like, because now he can like empty me no problem because his mouth is bigger and it's just when they're so little, you
Well, if
know?
you have one in the next few years, I'm sure
Yeah.
sure he could still help out.
Yeah. That's my hope. That's my hope.
So what do you feel like the Lord taught you through this experience? What do you feel like he showed you or
Mhm.
told you through it all?
Yeah. I feel like he definitely showed me just like how good he is and how kind he is. I feel like I'm trying to think how to word this. My doubts aren't bigger than his goodness and his like kindness to me. I think in seasons I've had a harder time thinking like, oh, if I'm doubting or if I'm fearful, like that he's going to withhold good gifts from me, like more conditional love. Um, and just seeing that, like my whole pregnancy of being so fearful, and doubting, and thinking that like, oh, this has to be the end result because of like, my kid will be, I don't know, colicky or like I was just like trying to like project and like think of like what the future is going to be like because of how afraid I am right now.
Oh,
And yeah, he was just like, nope, he's bigger than that. And so he was just so faithful and so kind and yeah, just so much bigger than my doubts.
I love that. Do you have any advice for moms, first time moms or moms who already have one? What would you tell them?
Yeah. I think that I would encourage anyone to just kind of take things as they come. It can be really easy to try to figure out the future, probably like good parts of the future or bad parts if you're anxiety prone, like I can be. And just know that like pregnancy can be really scary. I know not everyone has that experience, but if you are experiencing that or have experienced that, just know that that's normal, that it's like a very vulnerable time. And just to have like a lot of grace for yourself. I think when we like heap shame on ourselves for how we're feeling, it can just make things even worse. So yeah, just have a lot of grace on yourself and take care of yourself and your body. And if you need to go to counseling and talk to your friends. That community group that prayed for me during my labor, they were supporting me through my whole pregnancy. Like most weeks I was coming in and just talking about how scared I was, and they just encouraged me and prayed for me. And yeah, so if it's possible for you to find like a good community that can support you, I think that's life changing.
Mhm.
um yeah, just like a reminder that your body's doing a lot of work too. For me, like the word build, like my body builds a baby.
Mm.
Like that's incredible. Like it's just our bodies are just amazing. But it's a lot of work, even though like mentally I wasn't thinking about it. Just like I could feel how exhausting it was just in being tired. And yeah, just mentally I like cried like probably on average like 3 times a week when I was pregnant. I had this giant tissue box at work that my one coworker was like, "Where did you get that box? That has to be from Costco, right?"
Well, if it makes you feel any better, And it's like you said a couple things that I was like, "Oh yeah, me too, me too." The only times I've been to counseling have been during pregnancy.
Mm, mm.
And I cry when I'm pregnant. Like, I mean, it takes almost nothing to make me cry
Uh-huh.
when I'm
Yeah.
pregnant. When I'm not pregnant, I'm like super even keeled. But
Yeah.
like when I'm pregnant, I'm like, you'll know I'm pregnant if I'm crying.
It's so true.
And of course, super early postpartum, I'm like that too. But
Mhm.
once everything balances out, I'm kind of like back to my normal non crying self.
Yes. Yeah, I remember I don't know if you had this, but I had intense brain fog. Well, I had a lot of brain fog during my pregnancy, but then like postpartum, I was in this weird brain fog until like 10 weeks. And it was like weird. I remember the day that it lifted and it was just like all of a sudden I felt
Hmm.
like this cloud had lifted. It was so strange. So,
Well, I usually do. I just call the first 3 months the fog
yeah,
because I think between nursing and not sleeping and your body healing and things trying to like resituate and figure out life now, it's like it is, I call it the fog. And
it's good.
yeah, the first 3 months for sure.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah, they were like better than I could have imagined. And yet, looking back in some ways, I think they were harder than I can even really remember.
Oh yeah, it's the most bittersweet time.
It
It's like
really
the
is.
most precious,
Mhm.
fleeting,
Mhm.
like they're changing so quickly and they're growing so fast, and but at the same time it's like you're more tired than you've ever been, and your body is hurting and healing, and it's just yeah, it's a very bittersweet time.
It is. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and asking me questions and allowing me to share. Yeah.
Of course. Thanks again for joining us today. You can reach me at Surrendered Birth Services on Instagram or email me at contact@surrenderedbirthservices.com. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting subscribe. Also, we'd love for you to leave a review of the show so that more people like you can hear more stories like these. If you really enjoyed this episode in particular, please take a screenshot and post it to your Instagram story, tagging Surrendered Birth Services. If you're interested in taking my childbirth classes, birth consultations, or having me as your birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to my website for online and in-person options. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. Also, if you'd like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to get in touch with me. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands.